Hello, beautiful beings, and welcome back to Integrating Consciousness. For those who don't already know me, my name is Lelañea, and I am a Transcendental Coach and Unity Consciousness Guide. I invite you to sit with me in a conversation to explore one of the most profound, unsettling, and transformative phases of the human experience. It is the space between what was and what will be, the terrain of transition, initiation, and unraveling. And while it may not be widely recognized in conventional psychology, it is, however, deeply embedded in ancient spiritual traditions, transpersonal psychology, quantum psychology, and the once perceived as avant garde work of Carl Jung. Today's conversation is on the liminal space, which is the space of immense uncertainty and for many can feel like grief, sadness, melancholy, fear, anxiety, lostness, and confusion, as if you're grieving the loss of someone, but you aren't sure who. I personally have experience with the liminal space, having spent a significant amount of time in it. And through my own spiritual practice, I have learned that I was grieving the loss of someone. I was grieving the loss of the ego that I unknowingly constructed from a former state of consciousness that was constructed through cultural programming. And for all of us, once that consciousness shift occurs, the person you once were has no place to exist. Our suffering is through the resistance of letting go, of surrendering, and of finding safety in uncertainty. It is this new space of awareness that the liminal space is seen as an invitation to create, crystallize, or as a birthing space of the authentic you. So if this resonates with you, I invite you to be present with me, to be here now, grounded and centered, with your breath anchoring you into a space of calm and coherence. This conversation just might hold answers to the questions you've been asking for, the confusion and the suffering that you've been enduring, and the fear that you've been sitting in. I assure you, you aren't alone and you never have been. So, in my transcendental coaching practice, the bulk of my clients are in the liminal space. I have witnessed a wide range of reactions to the space from the dark night of the soul, egoic deaths, energetic alchemy of pain into purpose, reinvention, shadow integration, and for those who resist, not wanting to give up the illusion of control, eventually mental collapse. So let's explore the concept, the symptoms, the cosmic invitation, and the inner work of the liminal space. In this conversation, we will explore a plethora of spiritual beliefs and ancient spiritual concepts that speak to the somewhat taboo experience. So, what is the liminal space? Carl Jung in Depth Psychology describes it as the space between worlds. Carl Jung didn't use the phrase liminal space, but in his entire approach to individuation centers around it. Jung has described what he called the negro, or the blackening, which in Jungian alchemy, this is the first stage of transformation, also known as psychological dark night, where the ego is dismantled and shadow material rises. This state is profoundly liminal as the old identity has died, but the new self has not yet emerged, accentuating the threshold between ego and self. In this threshold, the ego must surrender its dominion to allow the greater self to emerge. The in between phase is often marked by chaos, disorientation, and symbolic death. So Jung wrote, in all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. This reflects the sacred unpredictability of the liminal space. In transpersonal psychology, it is described as spiritual thresholds. So, transpersonal psychology explicitly acknowledges liminal states as part of the journey towards spiritual realization and higher consciousness. In transpersonal psychology, we find spiritual emergencies, the birth canal metaphor, and peak experiences as examples of or including the liminal space. So, spiritual emergencies. These are temporary periods of intense psychological and spiritual upheaval where the ego structures dissolve and unitive states approach. The birth canal metaphor is a metaphor that describes perinatal matrices, which is where an individual relives trauma, death, and the rebirth cycles, and ego disintegration. It's a clear liminal terrain. And peak experiences, or the void. Peak experiences are these expansive soul filled states that are often preceded by deep liminality, where the seeker must let go of old cognitive maps, leaving them in a space of uncertainty. Stanislav Grof observed the full experience of psychospiritual death and rebirth requires the ego to die to give way to a deeper aspect of consciousness. My favorite, quantum psychology, describes it as the field of potentiality. So, quantum psychology, informed by quantum mechanics and consciousness studies, interprets liminality through the lens of non locality, indeterminacy, and the field of infinite probabilities. Liminality in quantum terms looks like the pre observation state, the observer effect, and the collapse of old patterns. So, the pre observation state is a liminal state akin to the quantum wave function, exists in pure potential until collapsed by observation. The observer effect, the observer or the self, co creates reality. In the liminal, when identity dissolves, we become more available to shape reality consciously, which creates the collapse of old patterns. And in quantum psychology, Amit Goswami's work in particular, healing and transformation requires stepping into the uncollapsed wave, the letting go of predictable ego bound versions of self. Amit Goswami wrote, "The quantum self is a potential self, not fixed. It can reinvent itself again and again. This is the essence of living in the liminal." So, the concept of the liminal space is deeply embedded in ancient Eastern philosophies. Even if the exact term liminal is modern and anthropological in origin, these traditions do not always articulate liminality in the Western academic sense, but they live it through rites, teachings, and metaphysical frameworks. Taking a look at Vedic, Buddhism, and Tantra, as well as Hermetic principles, starting with Vedic, we recognize the term niti niti, which means not this, which is also translated into loosely into not this, not that. It is a process of negation used to dissolve identity and conceptual attachment in the search for the Atman, or the true self. This approach holds the seeker in a liminal field between form and formlessness. So anything I can experience, I am not. I am not this body, not this mind. I am nothing. Yet through ET, I am this, loosely, I am this, I am that. By recognizing that I am not what I am experiencing, then I am the blank space or the emptiness, which includes the everything. So I am not this body, yet I am everybody. I am not this thought, yet I am all thoughts. I am nothing, which means I am everything. So by remaining all inclusive, we allow ourselves to remain expansive. Once you identify yourself to an experience, a body, or a mind, you become that, limiting your experience. So this is the attachment to suffering. And Buddhism will explore two fabulous terms, shunyata, which is emptiness, and anicca. So in shunyata, the realization that all things are empty of inherent identity. One who awakens to shunyata lives perpetually in liminal awareness, unattached to fixed form. Sunyata emphasizes interconnectedness, freedom from the illusion known as Maya, which can obscure the true nature of reality. Our perspective of reality is a lens or a filter that is not truth. And every lens or filter that we put on has its version of truth. Anicca Impermanence, recognizing the transient nature of all things, positions the practitioner in constant liminality, aware that clinging to identity is suffering. So, Anika is a path to deep wisdom and is not just a philosophical concept, but is a guide for living. Understanding and accepting impermanence can help us cope with life's challenges and embrace change with greater ease. Tantra is a profound esoteric lineage found within both Hindu and Buddhist traditions. So, Tantra doesn't just acknowledge liminal space, it seeks it out with its numerous practices, my favorite being Vamchara, or the left hand path. So, rituals that perpetually disrupt social norms and identity structures to plunge the practitioner into the in between where truth may be directly encountered. Tantra teaches the liminality is power because it is unbounded by form. And Hermetic principles, which plays a huge part in my practice and my work with my clients. So, the Hermetic principles, the principle in particular of rhythm, everything flows out and in, all phenomena rise and fall in cycles. So, liminal connection is the ebb between the tide. The pause between the inhale and the exhale are examples of the liminal. Neither forward nor backwards, just pure suspension. To master rhythm, Hermeticists train to be still in the swing. The pause point is where transformation occurs. So, what is the liminal space? We can surmise from all of the teachings, theories, and understandings that it is a sacred transitional space of becoming. It is the threshold between the life we are ready to leave and the life not yet formed. So it's this beautiful space of unformed potential, uncertainty, and creative gestation. So rather than being a void of confusion, it is a sacred chrysalis or a metaphysical womb where transformation occurs, and it is the most fertile ground for transformation. It is where the ego dies, creativity awakens, and the soul remembers itself, and it demands courage, trust, and surrender, for it holds no fixed map, only the raw, radiant potential of what you consciously choose to become. And for me personally, the liminal space is the pause at the height and the bottom of the breath. It is a space of existence, of being, of natural rhythm and creation. It is a space of the great knowing where one meets the self and only the self for examination and acceptance. So, what are some signs or characteristics of being in the liminal space? We'll go over quite a few, about 7 or 8 of them. And we'll start off with the primary one, uncertainty and not knowing. So, the liminal is uncomfortable because it lacks clear direction. But this very quality is what allows for creative emergence. When we surrender to the space of uncertainty and rely on our own internal guidance, intuition, and a developed internal system, then we become a compass that begins to steer the ship to our true north. So I mentioned internal systems. What are internal systems? Internal systems include our authentically constructed values, so not our society, not our cultural values or our familial values, but our values, and our communication and accountability of standards around these values, and our personal boundaries for self protecting our mental and emotional health. 2 is separation from an old identity, AKA egoic death. In this space, our former self dissolves and the next version of ourself begins to write itself fluidly and in real time. And this isn't to be confused with small identity shifts. So, what are identity shifts versus egoic shifts? Identity shifts occur throughout our lives. The more self aware we are, the more shifts will occur. These are beautiful, superficial pivots that allow us to horizontally explore desired aspects of self, recreate, rebrand, and even just explore an archetype. We see teenagers do this quite a bit. There's a huge emphasis on exploring archetypes. And then there's the egoic death, which comes with intense emotions of grief for many. These occur when the ego becomes disillusioned and disidentifies with the ego itself, or the mental construct that believes it is the center of your existence. So this becomes a soul level transformation, which looks like letting go of the need to be seen, approved of, or defined at all. It looks like dismantling the false sense of control and separation, and is often triggered by a crisis, a mystical experience, loss, or deep inner reckoning. And it feels like annihilation because it dismantles the illusion of me as a fixed entity. In this space, we see less of a desire to attach, defend, and react because there is no attachment to a construct that defines your existence. This place feels uncontrolled, humbling, and transpersonal. Egoic death cannot be managed like a shift. It is an undoing, it's a reckoning, and it's often involuntarily. It opens space for the true self, which is the essence, the soul, and connection to source to emerge. 3, creative potential and quantum possibility. So, in quantum physics, particles exist in a state of possibility known as a superposition until observed, at which point they collapse into form. Similarly, in the liminal space of transformation, our futures arise not through control, but through surrender, trust, and conscious awareness. Possibility becomes reality when it is met with presence. This is an incredible, unique space that for the majority has never been experienced. It is a space where we begin to understand the edges where comfort meets discomfort because we feel empowered to flirt with newfound edges. It is a place where we feel called to expand our bubble of perception that was created by the outdated and programmed ego. It is in this space that we truly encounter expansion rather than growth. In order for this to happen, we must become the observer of the old self, identifying the dying ego's edges that were once protected by fear and to push through them. Through new experiences, new flavors, new textures, and little wins, we pierce the veil of illusion. And 4, reverence over strategy. So rather than offering mindset hacks, the liminal invites us to honor and explore the unknown. It calls for presence, not performance. And this requires us to be here now. And through complete presence, we begin the process of co creation with the universe, attracting experiences and people in real time that mirror back to us our vibration associated with our beliefs, perspectives, behaviors, and actions. In real time, through observation, we then further explore ourselves and what we want to let go of in order to change what and who we attract. 5, where the true self emerges. So we remember who we are beyond identity, success, and ego. It is where we touch the divine essence of our being untethered from external validation. The liminal space is an invitation for transcendental work. This is where you become a conscious creator rather than creating from the subconscious, where wounding, shadows, inherited patterns, and programming live. When creating from this space, from the wounded ego, our lives are not our own, and our ego is the creation of the programming of others rather than a creative expression or a masterful work of art of a spiritual being having a human experience. You are not this body or this mind. You are a spiritual being perfecting your avatar or your vehicle in which you experience the multiple densities associated with the human experience. The densities are determined by the frequency of the vibration of your vehicle. So when you choose the programming of your vehicle rather than the world doing it for you, then you break free from the bondages of the lower densities and truly become a creator. That brings us to 6, non-linearity. So this space is not linear, it's not logical, and often appears to others as lostness. But in truth, is the holy space where alchemy and spiritual metamorphosis take place. In this space, there is no such thing as taking steps backwards. All actions, whether it is perceived as sidestepping or backtracking, are actions made appropriately to allow you to gain momentum, re-experience what you may not have previously integrated, or rest and receive. Relapsing and falling back into your old programming are not possible either. Once your eyes are open, they remain open. So you can choose not to let go of old patterns or behaviors that make it feel as though you're experiencing the world from the former ego. However, life will not feel the same, and you will continue to feel the calling to surrender to the little death. And as I mentioned, I have a personal experience in the liminal space. So, this space followed mystical events of oneness and a spiritual awakening that followed numerous painful and traumatic events that came with feelings and stories of immense betrayal and abandonment. And that left me spinning in a space of victimhood. I had been creating a life from a pattern of behavior and perception of the world that was intergenerational and programmed. So, as long as I continued to adopt the mindset, I would make choices that would support these sets of beliefs, cementing them further and further into reality until I was too far entrenched into this filter of perception to even be able to recognize that there are other realities and that these other realities are possible. So I had to learn the hard way, which isn't always the case for others, but it was for me. And the liminal space was a reprieve from the self imposed torment I had been subjecting myself to for years. And despite the uncertainty, despite the confusion, and how I may have been perceived by others, it was like floating in a sound bath where the only sound was that of my own frequency. And so I chose to become attuned, to listen, to observe, and to steady myself in this space, to support my nervous system in finding a calm that it very rarely knew. I chose to sit in the space of not knowing who Lelañea was or was to become. But what I did know is that who I knew of her was gone and there was no going back. There is an incredible freedom when we are no longer attached to material items or concepts. And the ego is just that. It's a programmed concept that we can choose to overwrite, reform, and even step away from. The further we immerse ourselves into our egos, buying into the belief that we are the ego, the more we perceive that the world is happening to us and the greater our suffering. So I participate in the Eastern belief that this is what leads to Western diagnosis of personality disorders, psychosis, and mental illnesses. The liminal space comes with discomfort, unpredictability, uncertainty, the reflecting of shadow and wound behavior, grief, paralysis, confusion, fear, resistance, disillusion, and even embarrassment. And once you realize where you're at, you can begin the process of surrender and settling into this new space. And once you do, the lower density of emotions begin to subside and new feelings begin to surface. So, feelings of what safety means, trust, expansion, healthy grieving, love, and excitement for all the potentials that exist for you and the new relationship that you have with self and with the universal energies available to you. So, in my transcendental practice, clients in the liminal often seek work with me through the perceived suffering of feeling lost, stuck, or not knowing who they are. And this immense grief translates into a story of crisis or feeling crazy, as well as depressed and anxious. And we live in a society where dysfunction is normalized and profit driven models often override genuine healing. So much of what is labeled as illness may in fact be a sacred calling towards spiritual transformation. This world is not healthy and it should not be relied on to reflect back who you are. So don't seek to learn yourself through the eyes of this society. When you surrender to the liminal space, you do the inner work of becoming self-aware of your subconscious programming and shadows. You develop your personal internal system and you consciously co-create rather than create from like a wounded, fragile ego. Then you don't need the world to tell you who you are, what your worth or your values are. Instead, you show the world what it means to live a life authentically in alignment with your divine truth. And no one can take that away from you. No one can separate you from the divinity of you and your connection to source. If you find yourself in the liminal space and you'd like one-on-one support to learn how to use these energies available to you while in this gestation period, then please schedule a discovery call with me. You aren't alone, and you never have been. And with the support of another, you can allow the liminal space to be a portal to a life that is a creation of your own, rather than that of an unhealthy society. If one-on-one is not for you at this time, please join my newly established school community where we can come together as a collective to support one another. This is a space where some of the same work that I do with my one-on-one clients is available. It might be what you need to jumpstart you towards your true north, or at least help you understand the energy and the space of where you're at. And if you would like to learn more about the liminal space and how it is calling those away from corporate jobs into a life of authentic creation, then check out my recent article on the Arts of Thought platform. I'll post the link in the show notes below. So if this conversation resonates with you, I would be grateful to hear from you in the comments below. And if it does not, and you made it all the way to this point, I'd say thank you. And somewhere in the background, maybe it does resonate with the deeper version of you, unbeknownst to your ego. So please keep traveling the YouTube algorithm, as there are plenty of content around other concepts that might meet you where you are. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for your curiosity. Thank you for doing your inner work. Thank you for your self-examination and your presence. And may you recognize the powerful creator you are.